I'm Ben Feinsteig. I'm a professor of philosophy here in the philosophy department at the University of Washington. I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. Let me begin by thanking a few people that helped make this event possible. First, I'd like to thank our administrative staff, Chris Dawson Ripley and Sarah Kremen Hicks, who have really done a lot of the organizational work behind the scenes for us. I'd also like to thank my colleague, Rose Novick, who, as part of our philosophy of science cluster here, is also helping to organize this event in this lecture series. And finally, and most importantly, I'd like to thank Patrick O'Hara and Katerina Randolph, whose generosity and commitment to intellectual engagement have made tonight's event possible. So let me ask for a round of applause for this. So the philosophy department here at UW seeks to engage with a broad range of contemporary issues of social, cultural, and political importance. We look for meaningful and innovative ways to apply traditional philosophical skills, most centrally those for analyzing and clarifying our reasoning. We do so in order to grapple with fundamental questions that rest at the core of our lives, both as individuals and as members of society. Now, this sort of engagement requires us to reach out of the department and make connections. So we have faculty who work with the University of Washington Center for Neural Technology, the medical school, the Evans School for Public Policy, the College of the Environment, Germanics, history, political science, the list goes on. We also reach outside the walls of our campus to facilitate conversations about politics and brew pubs, and to encourage Seattle children to ask questions in conversations with their peers in order to find their voices at an early age. Now, the O'Hara Lecture Series in Philosophy of Physics fits this mold by providing a forum for broad engagement with the remarkable achievements of contemporary science, many of which take place on this campus around us. So in particular, this series creates opportunities to grapple with the implications of fundamental physics, to enhance our understanding of the world we inhabit and our place in it. So I want to thank Patrick O'Hara and Katerina Randolph for making these lectures possible and creating an opportunity for us all to interact with our scientific colleagues in the Seattle area interested in a deeper understanding of contemporary science. We're very excited to welcome tonight our speaker, Laura Ruetsche, from the University of Michigan. Let me say something about the general structure of the event tonight. So first, Professor Ruetsche will present her lecture for about an hour, followed by about 30 minutes of Q&A. Afterwards, you'll all be invited to a reception just across the hall here in the Walker Ames room, which will run for about another hour afterwards. And we hope that will provide an opportunity for continued conversation and engagement. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce Laura Ruetsche, who is the Lewis Loeb Collegiate Professor in the Department of Philosophy at the University of Michigan. Professor Ruetsche obtained her BPhil from Oxford and PhD from the University of Pittsburgh. Professor Ruetsche has held faculty positions at Middlebury College and the University of Pittsburgh before moving to the University of Michigan in 2008. Professor Ruetsche's honors include a Charles A. Reiskamp Fellowship from the American Council of Learned Societies, serving as a fellow at the Stanford Center for the Advanced Study of the Behavioral Sciences, a Michigan Humanities Award, and a fellowship from the Michigan Society of Fellows. Professor Ruetsche's research spans philosophy of science, philosophy of physics, and the role of gender in epistemology and scientific inquiry. She's written extensively on the foundations of quantum mechanics, quantum field theory, and scientific realism. Her book, Interpreting Quantum Theories, which was published by Oxford University Press in 2011, is an investigation of the philosophical implications of quantum field theories. That book won the Lakatos Award for outstanding contributions in the philosophy of science. And I guess, as I was saying over dinner, inspired, I think, a generation of philosophers of physics. Personally, I'm also eagerly awaiting her next book, which is in progress, entitled The Physics of Ignorance, Representation, Realism, and the Renormalization Group, It is to be published by Oxford University Press. So please join me in welcoming Professor Ruetsche for her lecture, The Miracles Argument Meets Quantum Mechanics Toward a More Literate Philosophy of Physics.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks to everybody, Ben Bank, and thanks to everybody for coming out. I know it's a busy time of the term. This picture, which is a picture representing the artist's perspective, is sort of motif for the talk. So this is what philosophy of science sometimes feels like to me. There are some kind of philosophers of science, the balloonists, who look down on science from very lofty heights and ask sweeping questions of great abstraction. The nature of scientific representation, what's an explanation, is theory change rational? And then there's my crowd, the philosophers of physics, who I think of as down there in the swamp, frog people, in the muck, paying myopic, maybe even obsessive attention to particular concrete problems that arise in connection with specific physical theories. What's always struck me as philosophically provocative is that when the frog people and the balloonists get to the pub at the end of the day, compare notes on what they've been doing, it sometimes seems like they weren't necessarily the same thing. So I want that picture in the background of the talk today. What I'm going to try to do is talk about a thesis that's much debated in the balloon, the thesis of scientific realism. I'm going to talk about some arguments proffered in the balloon concerning this thesis, and then descend to the swamp to examine some examples from one of my favorite physical theories, quantum mechanics, that put balloon theses and balloon ways of thinking about science under pressure. In particular, I think these swamp examples challenge pictures of theoretical virtue encountered in the balloon, where a theoretical virtue is a feature of a scientific theory that makes it a good scientific theory. Like predicting accurately is a big one, but things like simplicity, parsimony, evidence, are also theoretical virtues. I think these swamp examples also challenge prevailing and attractive pictures of the nature of scientific understanding. And I'm going to close with an ode to a theoretical virtue. I think you need to be down in the swamp to appreciate the virtue of murkiness. So that's the plan. Okay, so the question of scientific realism, we're up in the balloon now. Let's grant, for the sake of argument, that there's an external world. It exists independently of us. It's the way it is independently of us. What we say about it is true or false according to what the world's like. The question of scientific realism, as I want to discuss it today, is the question of whether our best scientific theories, our most successful scientific theories, our best current theories, is this physical world the way they say it is? And because so many of our best scientific theories traffic in things and processes we can't observe directly, quarks and electrons and things like that, the question runs all the way down beneath the level of the phenomena, the things we can see, to the subphenomenal. Is the part of the world we can't see, the unobservable entities and processes posited by these theories, are they really out there? That's the question of scientific realism. And scientific realists, these balloon characters, they say yes, our best current physics, our best current theories are telling the truth, or something really close to the truth about unobservable subphenomenal entities and processes. And there's a famous swamp-level argument in favor of realism. I'm going to call it the miracles argument. Here's a classic statement of it due to Hillary Putnam. The basic idea is, wouldn't it be a bizarre coincidence if these theories worked as well as they did, if you could design iPhones and predict black hole evaporation, but they were false? The point of this argument, the thought behind this argument is the only way to make sense of science being as good as it is, in all the ways that it's good, is to think it's getting things right. That's the miracles argument. And here it is schematized the way philosophers like to schematize things and premise, conclusion, form. It's not a deductive argument, it's a plausibility argument. But the realist in the balloon says concerning a super successful theory that predicts, that explains, that describes novel phenomena, and unifies, and is elegant. They say, that theory is really, really, really successful. Its virtue has all these theoretical virtues. Its virtue in all these ways. And then they suggest the best way to make sense of this theory being as successful as it is that it's true. And the conclusion is, probably it's true. Not surefire, not fail-safe, but very, very likely it's true. This is the miracles argument. And in the balloon, there aren't just realists, there's also anti-realists, people who doubt that science is telling us the truth about parts of the world we can't see. And these balloon anti-realists have criticize the miracles argument on various sort of sophisticated philosophical grounds. A criticism I'm going to get back to is this one in Bosman Frossen's voice. This criticism is that there's other scientific explanations of why science is as successful as it is. Here's another scientific explanation. It's a kind of Darwinian explanation. It's that there's lots of theories, and we only hang on to some of them. Which ones do we hang on to? The ones that work. So science is successful because we like theories to work, and we pick these theories out of people don't like this argument very much, this counter-argument very much, but that's just to give you a flavor of how the debate goes in the balloon. Another element of the balloon dialectic is anti-realism going on the aggressive. So this isn't just a complaint about the miracles argument for scientific realism. This is a positive argument against scientific realism. It's known as the argument from underdetermination. It goes something like this. These super duper successful theories, they're super duper, at least in part because they describe superficial things very well, phenomena, what we can see, what we can observe, what we can measure. They also posit unobservable entities and processes. But surely there's other theories that agree with our super successful theories about the observable phenomena, but disagree about the subphenomena, the entities and processes. So I think the super successful theories we happen to have latched onto are the right ones, when there's a bunch of other competitors that seem like they could account just as well for the phenomena in virtue of which we believe in our super successful theories. Why believe T rather than any of its observationally equivalent rivals? In the balloon, there's a variety of responses the realists give. A really brazen one is just to deny that this could really happen, that there could be like another theory as successful as our favorite theory, that underdetermination is a thing. A more modest and interesting balloon realist response sort of reverts to this idea that there's a panoply of theoretical virtues. Any basically decent theory, this reply goes, is going to get the phenomena right. That's kind of ground level, entry level. What you want from a scientific theory is just describe observations accurately. But really good theories, truly virtuous theories, are going to do even better. They're going to exhibit a bunch of theoretical virtues, good-making theories of scientific theories, good-making features of scientific theories beyond describing the phenomena. They're going to be simple, they're going to be elegant, they're going to explain, they're going to be fertile. And these additional virtues beyond describing the phenomena, call them super empirical virtues, break ties. Okay, so the idea is, okay, maybe there's underdetermination, but there's still going to be a winning theory. It's going to be the theory that has the most super empirical virtues. A super empirical, I'm eventually going to talk about quantum mechanics, I promise. A super empirical virtue that's going to matter when it comes to assessing ways of thinking about quantum mechanics is this kind of getting along well with other well-established theories. And in particular, another well-established physical theory is the theory of relativity. So I'm going to stop to talk, or pause to talk a little bit about what it takes to get along well with the theory of relativity. One thing it takes to get along well with a theory of relativity is to refrain from positing an objective relation of distance simultaneity. So let me illustrate that this way. This is a picture of me and my high school frenemy, Peter Luce. We've heard this rumor that if you start the album, The Dark Side of the Moon, the same time you start the movie, The Wizard of Oz, that the frame in the movie when the scarecrow appears coincides with the lyric in the album where they sing the lunatic is in the grass. Okay, this is a very interesting claim. We decide to investigate it, but my high school frenemy, Peter Luce, is a very, very, very serious Floyd fan. And he undertakes to do his part of the investigation, which is listen to the album, because he's the Floyd fan on the moon. And I'm going to watch the movie on Earth. And the point is, according to theory of relativity, this is a stupid way to do this experiment, because there's just no answer. There's just no objective, physically privileged answer to which events on the moon are simultaneous with which events on the Earth. There's no answer to when the lyric, the lunatic is on the grass, comes out of Peter's gramophone, what event on Earth is simultaneous. Different observers following perfectly legitimate conventions give different answers. Just no fact. No fact about distance simultaneity. No fact about when distant events occur at the same time. That's what relativity says. So in order to get along with relativity, a theory must refrain from positing distance simultaneity. Refrain from giving an account of which events on Earth are simultaneous with which events on the moon that would make Peter's and my experiment be a real experiment. Okay, back to the main thread. The frog people have been bristling through this entire discussion so far. This entire discussion so far has largely been framed in terms of some placeholder theory, T. And the frog people impatiently burst in and say, what are you talking about? What T? What is theory? Let's talk about real physical theories. And the balloonists, they're at the pub. They're trying to be amiable. They're like, okay, calm down, frog people. Let's stop talking about some abstract, impersonal theories. You talk about a real physical theory. Talk about quantum mechanics. And let's look at what the miracles argument looks like when every place T occurs, placeholder T, you substitute quantum mechanics, a real physical theory. So that's what the miracles argument looks like now. And the frog people and the balloonists, the realists and the anti-realists are examining this de-schematized miracles argument. And I think all hands can agree that the first principle, quantum mechanics is successful, is about as well supported as, first premise, quantum mechanics is successful, is about as well supported as a premise can be. In the history of Western science, there's been no more successful theory than quantum mechanics. It describes phenomena from subatomic processes to black hole processes to an amazing degree of accuracy. It's why your phones work. It's, premise one is beyond reproach in the argument. So it's looking pretty good for the miracles argument. But then the realist pauses for a little bit. She's a realist. She likes the miracles argument. She's supposed to believe the conclusion. And at this point, the realist asks, what am I going to do? What does it take? What am I doing when I believe quantum mechanics is true? I've been persuaded by this argument. Having been persuaded I should believe quantum mechanics is true. What does that belief entail? What is it to believe quantum mechanics is true? What do I believe when I believe quantum mechanics is true? I'm going to give a name for the answer to that question. The name is an interpretation of quantum mechanics. An interpretation of quantum mechanics is an account of what quantum mechanics says. Think of it as a picture of the world according to quantum mechanics. It's an account that supplies the content of belief in quantum mechanics. It's what you believe when you believe quantum mechanics. You believe in interpretation. And there's a pretty tight and attractive picture of interrelations between interpretation, belief, understanding, other things we care about. To interpret a theory is to say, what would the world be like if the theory were true? What picture of the world does this theory give? Interpretation is a prerequisite for belief. There's nothing you believe when you believe a theory, no content in your belief, unless your belief is accompanied by an interpretation. There's a case to be made that the interpretation of a theory mediates understanding the theory. What it is to understand a theory is to grasp what the world would be like if it were true. It's to see the picture of the world it gives you. Okay, but Lovely. Oh no. Notice this will be important down the road. You can interpret theories without believing them. Just like you can understand stories while thinking of them as fiction. And there might be reasons to interpret theories that take the form other than wanting to believe them. Perhaps interpretation they're action guiding. So there's a further question, having noted this tight connection between interpretation, belief, and understanding, which is why believe? And the miracles argument, another way of looking at it, is an argument the realist gives that you should believe because belief is the best way to answer a question different from the interpretive question. The question called explain up here. The question, why does a successful theory work as well as it does? The miracles argument is it works as well as it does because the picture it gives of the world is correct. Okay, so this is all meant to motivate the thought that to understand quantum mechanics, or to believe it, and therefore to enact the conclusion of the miracles argument, to be a wage-earning scientific realist who's standing up for something rather than just mouthing realist slogans, you need an interpretation of quantum mechanics. You need a sense of what picture of the world quantum mechanics affords. Okay, that's our next topic, interpretations of quantum mechanics. So I'm going to talk about sort of sample quantum property called spin. It's a quantum property that you can measure by shooting a beam of electrons through a carefully constructed magnet, when they're shot through, they split. If an electron in the beam is deflected up, the measurement has the outcome spin up. If it's deflected down, the measurement has the outcome spin down. Okay. Here I'm going to stop and do something I'm not going to keep doing the rest of this talk, which is to admit I'm often going to simplify and gloss over complications that kind of distract from the central conceptual point. Nobody does this experiment with electrons. The first time they did it is with silver ions, where the outer shell electron governed the dynamics of the interaction. And the pattern I'm showing is a pattern you'll admit if you somehow contrive for the magnet to be moved in this direction. This is sort of the data cleaned up. But the data cleaned up is sort of sufficient for the kind of purposes of illustrating how quantum mechanics works. So it looks like there's a property electrons have spin that we measure this way. The property has two values. That's quantization, up and down. A little bit more about quantum theory. Quantum theory ascribes states to physical systems, and it uses the states it ascribes systems to extract predictions about the probability of measurement outcomes. Okay, so the quantum states, they're always, quantum states are always going to appear in these Angley brackets. It's part of a very, very, very hilarious joke due to Dirac. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how quantum states work. So a possible state of the electrons is up. We're going to imagine we have a whole bunch of electrons in the quantum state up. There's a backstory about how that's possible. We're skipping it. Quantum mechanics tells us when all these electrons are in the state up, then all of them, 100%, surefire disposition they have, they're deflected up by the magnet. They're spin-up electrons. Another possible state, quantum state of the electrons, is a state of calling down. You might expect we have a beam of electrons in the state down. Quantum mechanics tells you all of them are deflected down. They're spin down electrons. Okay, here's where things get interesting. In addition to those two states, up and down, there's a slew, infinitely many other states that you can build sort of mathematically by making sums of up and down with different expansion coefficients. If you don't like the equations, this is the form of words. In addition to the state up, that for sure is deflected up, and the state down, that for sure is deflected down, there's a huge number of states that are, here's the word, superpositions of up and down. Superpositions, just the term for a mathematical, superpositions of up and down. Quantum states that are superpositions. Here's a nice instance, the state psi. There's the superposition. If you don't like the equation, here's how to think pictorially about what happens is a beam of electrons whose state is a superposition. A beam of electrons, the superposition of up and down states, is split by the magnet. In the case of this particular superposition, it's a 50-50 split, but if you change the coefficients, the split breaks different ways. Okay, so that's another possible quantum state of the electrons, and actually, the most typical quantum states are superpositions. They're just two surefire one way or the other states, and infinitely many superpositions. Okay. And like I said, superpositions is where things get interesting. When the electron state is up, and for sure it gets deflected up, and now think of this as a picture of a single electron going through the apparatus. It's attractive and reasonable, I think, to say, this is an up electron. This is an electron that has a property of spin. This is an electron that has a determinate spin value. The spin-up electron, how would I know the spin-up electron? That explains why it's certain to be deflected up. And likewise, when the single electron is in the state down, it seems absolutely appropriate to say it's a down electron. There's a fact about electron spin. It's spin down. That's why, for sure, it gets deflected down. Okay, and this is going to be a very important thought to what follows. And a thought I'm not going to have time during this talk to completely motivate, but I'm going to present it and run with it. What about an electron, a single electron whose state is a superposition, whose state has sort of both up and down parts to it? Well, there's an answer that's orthodox, and by orthodox I mean there's sentences that say this in a lot of very well-established quantum mechanics textbooks. It's a very orthodox answer about the spin of this electron, which is when an electron's in a superposition of up and down, when an electron's in a state that doesn't predict the spin measurement with certainty, there's no fact. There's no fact about the electron's spin value. So the orthodox answer is where there are superpositions, there are no facts. It's not a spin-up electron, it's not a spin-down electron, it's not both kinds of electrons, it's not neither kind of electron. It's in some sort of weird limbo. Eerie. So there's eerie picture of the condition of an electron in a superposition. Why be so eerie? Like, people didn't want to be eerie. They were forced into it, they felt like, by the phenomena. And kind of stark version of the phenomena is if you try to build a theory that's less eerie, if you try to build a theory that scatters facts around the world even where there's superpositions, and you demand that theory to play well with relativity, demand that theory to refrain from making sense of an absolute distance simultaneity relation, that theory says things that are false. That theory contradicts orthodox quantum mechanics, and you can do the experiments, and they look like they uphold orthodox quantum mechanics. So like, nobody wanted to be eerie and creepy, but they felt backed into it by the quantum phenomena. They felt backed into, if there's superposition, then there's no facts. Okay. So that's part of why interpreting quantum mechanics is interesting. Here's some more about why interpreting quantum mechanics is interesting. And at this point you might think, okay, electrons can be pretty eerie, but there's a well-worn human response to things they're uncomfortable with, which is to sequester them. And so you might think, okay, electrons are eerie, but what's it to me? What sort of weirdness, what sort of bizarreness, what sort of metaphysical limbos they get up to in the privacy of their own atoms? It's got nothing to do with me. Okay. So this sort of don't ask, don't tell attitude about superposition doesn't survive thinking about why it is we believe this theory. Why it is we believe quantum mechanics. We believe quantum mechanics, or I guess I started out by saying we don't know how to believe quantum mechanics is what we're trying to answer. We take quantum mechanics seriously because it does a crackerjack job of predicting the outcomes of experiments. All kinds of experiments, quantum statistics, uphill, even when you're hoping and praying they won't be, because then the world will make better sense. Quantum mechanics is an amazing job of predicting measurement outcomes and their statistical patterns. So next I'm going to talk a little bit about thinking through what constitutes a quantum measurement. What would it take to have set up an interaction that counts as a good measurement of electron spin? Well, here's a thought. I can't look at the electron and tell whether it's spin up or spin down. I gotta do something sneakier. I gotta get the electron to interact with something I can observe directly. A pointer system, a pointer apparatus, interact in such a way that features of the electron get amplified into a signal I can decode. Okay. The pointer system in these expositions, and I don't condone this, but I'm stuck with it, inevitably is a cat. Okay. So the thought is that a good measurement is going to be an interaction between the teeny observable electron and something big and observable that has the feature that the state of the electron before the interaction is correlated with the state of the pointer after the interaction. So correlated means up electron leaves the pointer in one state, down electron leaves the pointer in a distinguished state. So imagine that the correlation works as follows. If the electron's up, we've engineered the interaction so that the cat stays alive, which, I'm doing the equations down here, the picture's up here. And the rest of the correlation, if the electron's down, we engineer the interaction so that the cat's dead. Where this blue arrow here is something I've introduced to flag that we're talking about an interaction, we're talking about a piece of physics, we're talking about a piece of physical time development. It's the job of physical theories to describe physical time development. It's the job of quantum mechanics to describe how quantum states evolve. So this interaction, this measurement interaction is a physical process unfolding in time. It's a physical process. If quantum mechanics is universal theory, involves systems that are quantum mechanical. It's a physical process that should fall under the ambit of quantum dynamics, quantum stories about how states change over time. Okay, so a good measurement, down electron gets correlated with dead cat, up electron gets correlated with live cat, that kind of time development over the course of the measurement interaction, which is constituent of being a good measurement. Okay, now something very bad's gonna happen. we're going to assume, I told you how the measurement unfolds if it starts with an up electron, and how it unfolds if it starts with a down electron. What if it starts with an electron in one of these zany superpositions? Or what if it's a good measurement? And this is the third piece. What if we take quantum mechanics itself to tell you about the blue arrow, to tell you about how the system involved in measurement evolves? Then here's a picture of what happens. You start out with an electron in a superposition of up and down that you're just trying to live with. In the course of the measurement interaction, if the measurement interaction obeys the rules of quantum mechanics, the electron superposition infects the pointer system. Whoops. It infects the cat. The measurement interaction is supposed to be a good measurement interaction, leaves the cat in a superposition of live and dead. And if we're serious about this orthodox cowardice about where there's facts, if we're serious about thinking where there's superpositions, then there's no facts. And it seems like we better be, because the alternative is contradicting quantum mechanics. A good measurement interaction that's obedient to the laws of quantum mechanics leaves the cat in a state where it's not a live cat, where it's not a dead cat. It leaves a cat in a state where the measurement has no outcome. So I think this is important enough and also easy enough to understand that I'm going to walk us through the equations for a few slides. If that's not to your taste, just hang on to this picture as a picture of something that goes terribly awry when we try to describe the processes in virtue of which we believe quantum mechanics, measurement processes quantum mechanically. The thing that goes awry that shows us this attitude of sequestering the weirdness of superposition, the tiny things that are subatomic systems, isn't a winner. It's doomed. But here's the equations. In quantum mechanics, a piece of quantum mechanics that tells you how systems change over time, that gives you quantum dynamics, is something called the Schrodinger equation. It's the blue arrow from the previous pictures. And the Schrodinger equation tells you some features of the blue arrow. And one of the features is, it's called linearity, but it's pretty easy to understand. One of the features is, if you got a quantum state A, and its Schrodinger evolves to the state A prime, you got a quantum state B, and its Schrodinger evolves to the state B prime, then the Schrodinger equation tells us it's gotta be, and this is sort of pleasing and natural, so it's a good thing, it's gotta be a superposition of A and B, evolve into a superposition of what A would evolve to or what B would evolve to. Okay, that's what Schrodinger equation tells us about the character of quantum state evolution. So let's walk through the picture of measurement interaction again, only equation-wise. So before the measurement, you've got the electron in its superposition. You've got the cat in its happy, ready state. It's alive. And this orthodox rule of thinking about things says, oh, you're out of luck, you can only make sense of the electron spin. You can make sense of the cat's bio state. It's alive. And just trust me, you're allowed to rewrite this pre-measurement state this way, multiplying everything through. The cat's still alive, because it's alive on both branches. And now we know, because we know the measurement's a good measurement, we know how this part plus live evolves. If it's a good measurement, measurements correlate pre-measurement, object system states with post-measurement, pointer system states, plus live evolves to plus live. So a good measurement minus live evolves to minus dead. This is how you can tell what the spin of the electron is by checking out the state of the cat. So we know that much about the state evolution. And then we also know it's Schrodinger evolution. And because it's Schrodinger evolution, we know knowing how the components evolve determines how the superposition evolves. And so the three assumptions, the electron starts out in a superposition, the measurement is good, and the measurement interaction obeys the Schrodinger equation, delivers the composite system to this post-measurement superposition, where the cat is in this weird limbo of alive and dead. And the punchline is, we know cats are never in that kind of condition. And broadening the punchline from cats to physics, what I've just shown you is that if quantum mechanics describes measurements accurately, then it's a prediction of quantum mechanics that most measurements don't have outcomes. But the other reason we believe quantum mechanics is that so many measurements have outcomes conforming to the pattern of statistical predictions posited by quantum mechanics. So this is the quantum measurement problem. If the Schrodinger equation, quantum dynamics is universally valid, and if their superpositions mean no facts, then this is an empirical theory that predicts there aren't empirical data, which is a pretty twisted problem for an empirical theory to have. It's quantum mechanics measurement problem. And this is a legacy slide. The predicament of someone who would interpret quantum mechanics is to sort of navigate the Scylla and Charybdis of making too many things determinate, taking maybe too many facts and saying something false, and being very reluctant in recognizing facts and not saying anything of any empirical interest at all. It's a pretty big ask, but that's what we ask of interpretations of quantum mechanics. The next part of the talk, I'm going to very sketchily run through some interpretive options, some attempts to navigate the Scylla and Charybdis, and describe them and note some of their features in the sense of feature where it's questionable whether a feature is a bug or not. But so this is going to be my picture of the measurement problem, that if you perform a measurement on a system whose initial state is a superposition infects the pointer system and the measurement doesn't have an outcome, and that's really bad. The textbook solution to the measurement problem is if Schrödinger evolution causes the superposition to infect the apparatus, then suspend Schrödinger evolution, substitute a new kind of evolution that delivers the object plus pointer system, the electron and the cat, to a state we can understand, to the state where the pointer's pointed, to the state where the cat's alive, or the state where the cat's dead. In all my examples, the cat's going to be alive, because I like cats. So this Shazam, this interruption of Schrödinger evolution in favor of a jump to a determinate outcome state is known as measurement collapse. Where Schrödinger evolution is continuous, it's deterministic, it's time reversible, collapse is none of these things. But it gives you outcome states. And it also gives you an account of probability, because it's part of the collapse postulate that the quantum probabilities ascribed by the pre-measurement superposition govern which way, the frequency with which the collapse happened one way and the other. Okay, so that's a way to square the fact that measurements have outcomes obedient to quantum statistics with some features of quantum mechanics. But a feature of it is, if you've ever studied any modern philosophy, it's a miracle in Hume's sense. Hume defined a miracle as a violation of the laws of nature. The Schrödinger equation is a law of nature. Measurement collapse is a violation of the Schrödinger equation. Okay, that's a pretty uncomfortable thing to be foisting upon your theory, especially if you don't conjoin it with a very sharp account of given these two incompatible kinds of state evolution, when one defaults a system and then the other. Okay, next interpretation. So that's the picture of the measurement problem again. I'm going to call them spontaneous localization interpretations. Gerard Urini Weber are authors of a famous one. So their idea is, instead of making a collapse a miracle, make collapse the law. But make collapse the law in a very, very cagey way. Get rid of the Schrödinger equation, but replace it with a stochastic dynamics, a dynamics where there's jumps, where the dynamics is tuned very carefully so that the Schrödinger equation, especially for isolated systems, is approximately correct. So isolated systems have a very, very, very low probability of experiencing a collapse. But big systems, like cats and pointers, they have a much higher probability of experiencing a collapse. So you replace the Schrödinger equation with something that looks a lot like the Schrödinger equation most of the time, but looks like collapse when you need it to, when there's big systems involved. That's the idea behind the GRW spontaneous localization approach. Some of its features is this tuning kind of requires you, unlike collapse, to take a stand about some new fundamental constants, where if you tie your math to some particular values for these fundamental constants, some very clever Austrian can do an experiment that shows you pick the wrong values. That's one kind of feature of it. Another kind of feature of it is the most natural ways, the most attractive ways of spelling it out aren't consistent with relativity. They seem to require a sort of privileged story about which events on the moon are simultaneous with which events on Earth. Okay. So let's keep trying. Something else I offer is called the Bohm theory. Again, that's a picture of the measurement problem. According to the Bohm theory, that's all wrong. Here's our individual electron. It's a particle, sort of time lapse. It's a particle that follows a trajectory. The cat's composed of particles, they follow trajectories. There's equations of motion for the trajectories of particles. They're deterministic equations of motion for the trajectories. They're continuous trajectories. The trajectories are very, very, very sensitive to initial conditions. This is a picture of the trajectories Bohm theory predicts for the double slit experiment, if you're familiar with that. So the exact place the electron starts makes a difference, according to Bohm theory, to whether it gets deflected up or down, which in turn makes a difference to how the particles in the cat arrange themselves, which in turn makes a difference to whether the cat's alive or dead. But the point is, any single electron is always at a particular place at a particular time. If it's the case that the distribution of possible electron positions is ever given by the quantum statistics, then the way the theory is cooked up, future distributions are always going to be given by quantum statistics. That's the Bohm theory. It's nutty trajectories. A feature of the Bohm theory, among others, is that it just does not get along with relativity. The dynamics it spells out that determine the continuous trajectories are such that if me and Peter interact before he goes off to the dark side of the moon and he moves, according to the Bohmian equations of motion, I gotta move instantaneously in response, where instantaneously presupposes a privileged account of which events on the moon are simultaneous with which events on Earth. Okay, the Bohm theory just doesn't get along with relativity. Okay, there's the measurement problem again. Another family of interpretations of quantum mechanics, the Everett interpretation, sometimes the many worlds interpretation. The idea is to posit some kind of multiplicity of worlds, of minds, of branches, and to allow there's a post-measurement superposition, but contend that the post-measurement superposition describes the multiplicity as a collective, and that within each element of the multiplicity, things are as sensible as you'd like. So this is my attempt to depict the Everett interpretation. That's what I said. And featured in this are, David Lewis said, I don't know how to respond to an incredulous stare, but if anything deserves an incredulous stare, the idea that whenever measurements are conducted, there's some sort of branching of reality does. And as with the Bohm theory, there's also a question, what are quantum probabilities in this approach? Because it looks like everything happens with certainty. What are quantum probabilities? Okay, that was a breakneck tour of some interpretations of quantum mechanics. I don't think I made any of them perfectly clear, but I hope it gives you a sense of some of the maneuvers and some of the qualms you might have about the maneuvers. So let's get back to the pub where the frog people and the balloonists are hanging out. As I'm running short on time, I'm going to skip over some of this. One maneuver attempted by the balloon realists was to say, okay, maybe there's underdetermination in this theory by data, but data is not the only thing that matters about physical theories. In addition to saving the phenomena, describing observation, physical theories should be parsimonious, they should be elegant, they should be metaphysically satisfying, they should be fecund, they should lead to even better theories. And that these super empirical virtues are going to break ties between observationally equivalent rivals. And I think something that emerges when you think about quantum interpretation of Swann is, first of all, there is some serious underdetermination going on. Like these theories I just talked about, these interpretations I just talked about, almost all of them has very serious, very thoughtful, very well-respected advocates. None of them is off the table. But the thing is, these rivals seem like an example of underdetermination of interpretation by theory, where it doesn't seem to be the case that super empirical virtues break ties. Like, even among parties who think they know what to believe when they believe quantum mechanics, and these people are kind of a minority on Earth, but there are people who think they know what they believe when they believe quantum mechanics. Even among such people, there's massive disagreement about which super empirical virtues matter and which interpretations manifest those virtues. So just some documentation. David Wallace gave one of these once, is that right? Yeah. Yeah, so it's a sociological observation. About 10 years ago, there was a cluster of people who thought they knew what to believe when they believed quantum mechanics. They were sort of organized around Shelley Goldstein and others in New Jersey. And a cluster of people who thought they knew what to believe when they believed quantum mechanics, who were sort of organized around David Wallace in Oxford. The people in New Jersey, they believed the bone theory version. The people in Oxford believed the Everett version. And David Wallace had this great joke that the only difference between the two camps was the Atlantic Ocean. So these are quotations from people from those two camps. So the first set, Wallace is saying Everett's great because it's relativistic, or his rivals aren't so great because they're not. And both theory advocates say, I don't care about relativity that much. And the second pair of quotations, Bohmians and Everettians are arguing about which interpretation is clearer, more precise, more direct, more natural, each claiming that virtue on behalf of their own interpretation. And I hope just the thumbnail sketches of the interpretations I gave you in the different ways they weren't totally satisfying makes it plausible that if you put together a scorecard, I mean, this is controversial, this is my scorecard. Other people have put together different scorecards with different headings and different evaluations. But most people's scorecards would be such that there's no single interpretation that clearly manifests the lion's share of the super-empirical virtues. Depending on which super-empirical virtue you care about, different interpretations will express it. Okay, so let's go back to the miracles argument. What I've just been telling you, just sociological observation, but also, I think, a scandal. People who are scientific realists, many of them, the ones I know, would rather wait for quantum mechanics to go away than believe it. Like they feel some real disquiet about believing quantum mechanics, where some of the disquiet has to do with the extent to which quantum mechanics overturns some of the things that believing their features of the world inclines you to realism. And what that means is the miracles argument, strongest, most compelling argument for realism, run with respect to the particular theory of quantum mechanics, that's the most successful theory ever, eventuates in a conclusion, quantum mechanics is true, that most realists are loath to accept. Okay. I think that's scandalous. If the miracles argument doesn't work for successful scientific theories, it doesn't. Okay, so what's going on? The sort of last theme is going to be thinking about what's going on. This is where we've gotten. So notice that the first premise of the miracles argument attributes the theory to a host of virtues, all kinds of virtues, all the reasons that incline us to believe it. Its strength, its simplicity, its fecundity. But if this theory T achieves different virtues under different interpretations, then there isn't going to be a single interpretation of the theory that the premise of the miracles argument gives you a bunch of reasons to believe in. Different kinds of success are going to be reasons to believe in different and rival interpretations. So the whole collection of successes isn't going to be a reason to believe in a single interpretation. The miracles argument fails, it's too strong, but it's equivocating a little bit. I think this shows the possibility that a single theory could exhibit different virtues under different interpretations, thereby attenuating the strength of support its successes give belief in any particular interpretation. I think the circumstance reveals that the realist, when she gives the miracles argument, is resting on an implicit premise. And the implicit premise is that the theory they want to be a realist about has what I'm going to call a winning interpretation. An interpretation that exhibits most, if not all, of the super-empirical virtues we care about, and an interpretation that has no serious rivals. Only in the case that there's a winning interpretation of theory do all the successes cited in the first premise of the miracles argument constitute reasons to believe the theory under that interpretation. So a silent partner of realism is this winning interpretation idea. And I think the root of the scandal is there is no winning interpretation of quantum mechanics. I mean, there's people who think they know what the winning interpretation is, but the way they keep score is so tendentious that they're in the minority. There's no winning interpretation of quantum mechanics, and that's why realists can't be brought by the miracles argument to believe it. That's what derails the miracles argument. So I'm going to close by drawing a few more lessons from this. This is what I just said. The reason realists can't bring themselves to believe quantum mechanics is there's no winning interpretation. And the miracles argument is sort of implicitly supposing there's a winning interpretation. Remember the thing I said at the beginning, that interpretation is how we understand? We understand a theory by latching on to how to interpret it. We understand a theory by seeing its picture of the world. Maybe we should be worrying that giving up on a winning interpretation, resigning ourselves to the circumstance that quantum mechanics lacks a winning interpretation, is also giving up on understanding quantum mechanics. If there's no winning interpretation, does it follow that we don't understand quantum mechanics? I want to push back against that. I want to push back as follows. We can deny there's a winning interpretation, a single way of thinking about the quantum world that makes sense of all the ways quantum mechanics succeeds. We can deny that without giving up on more local projects of making sense of quantum mechanics, more local projects of understanding why it succeeds in this way in these circumstances. And here I want to give a shout out to Professor Emeritus Arthur Fine, who I think charted this kind of course in his book, The Natural Ontological Attitude, in the 80s. 96 was the second edition. The idea that science has a local texture and science is best appreciated by paying attention to that local texture. Okay. And giving up on an idea there's a winning interpretation is also consistent with thinking long and hard about quantum mechanics with a view towards getting a sense of what the interpretive options are, what their strengths and frailties are, in what circumstances those strengths and frailties matter most. Okay. And last of all, I have to stop walking on the range. I want to suggest this learning to navigate the space of interpretations. I want to say maybe that just is understanding quantum mechanics. It's definitely a sense of understanding. I don't know anything about art or literature, or for that matter, people. But I think it's a sense of understanding that's more continuous with what it is to understand a human being, or a movie, or a book. Like, I feel like I often understand movies better when I talk about them with my friends and see they have different ideas of what's going on in the background of the characters. I think I understand people insofar as I do, not because I've got a single axiomatic account of them, but because I have a sense of the different ways they can be in different circumstances. Maybe scientific understanding can sometimes be the same way, and require getting a sense for a space of possibilities, how it's carved up, what different parts of it are good for. Not to say the other kind wouldn't be great to have, but just to say we shouldn't descend into despair about whether there's any understanding at all when there isn't a winning interpretation. And my wackiest idea of all, maybe that a physical theory resists a winning interpretation that lends itself to this other sort of understanding, this more literary sort of understanding. Maybe that's something that's good for physics. Good for physics, not in the form physics may sometimes take of a final, complete, fundamental theory that answers all questions and succeeds in every application without any rough edges or cheating. But for physics as we find ourselves using it now, physics that's part of, as Wilfrid Sellars says, a scientific image still under development. Physics that's a work in progress. So I warned you that Van Frost quotation would come back. He suggested the reason our theories are so successful is that we got to choose from a bunch of competing theories, and of course we chose the successful ones. But let's run with the evolutionary metaphor. Scientific theories had to do a lot of things. They have to be the backbone of calculations, which often involves using them for approximations, or sometimes picturing what's going on as a guide to approximations. They have to suggest experiments. They have to give you clues about how to model and think about experiments. They have to, this is important, lay the groundwork for their own successors. They have to be springboards before the theorizing. They have to help you find where they break down so that you can improve them. They have to frame explanations. They have to be taught to students so they're thinking more scientists to further refine physics. There's lots of different things scientific theories have to, lots of different selection pressures scientific theories are a subject to. And the wacky thought is a theory that underdetermines its own interpretation, a theory conducive to understanding this more literary sense, a theory that can be articulated in different ways in different circumstances. Maybe just in virtue of that variety, it's like a healthy breeding population. It's got enough genetic diversity that the whole range of challenges a scientific theory confronts, that theory has a chance under some interpretation or another to meet those challenges. And maybe I think this is the most important thing of all. It's not final physics. Maybe a theory that admits a lot of interpretations also admits a lot of avenues of future development. And admitting a lot of avenues of future development increases the chances that traveling one of them, one will come to find an even better, a better theory. So that's what I just said. This is the end. Thank you.